Eugene, the aftermath of 293,
Yep.
Sydney.
Yeah. What can I say? It's an interesting one. 6 guys fighting. We've got a 50% winning record there. 3 lost and 3 won. So happy and sad. The contrast of having 3 guys win and then 3 guys losing is.
Tell us a little bit about the fact of just having that many. I think it was the most anybody's ever had in a UFC.
Yeah, possibly. I never got that fact confirmed, but probably wouldn't do it again. But I also wouldn't deny that opportunity for everybody and for this team. It was pretty historic to have that many guys on the card, pretty much half the card.
Why wouldn't you do it again?
Just the workload was huge. And then obviously we're trying not to let that mitigate on anybody's or impact on anybody's camp, and I don't think we did. I think we did really well, but that doesn't take away the fact that it was just a massive workload. When you have 6 guys fighting, you have 6 opponents, you have 6 guys to study, you have 6 strategies, you have 6 rates of progression, you have 6 guys either periodically kind of like understanding the strategy and doing well at it, or you have half those guys understanding their strategy, the other half not, and so you've got to tweak it and not change it but tweak it so they understand it and they start to comprehend it a little bit better. And then you've got to do that every few days or every week, or you've got to be constantly adjusting these guys based on their, not just their comprehension of what we're trying to get across, but also their ability to get that across. Sometimes you're trying to work within the limitations, I guess, of what your fighter's capabilities are, and sometimes you over or underestimate those capabilities, and so you have to just adjust the strategy, and those have to be really clear and concise calls, because at this stage you're in camp, you've got 8 to 9 weeks, or depending on how long your camp is, sometimes 12, but that 12 to 8 weeks goes fast, and in terms of how people learn, that's not a lot of time, and so you've got to make it very clear and concise. If you're going to make a call to tweak a strategy or take the fighter in a slightly different direction in a particular area, then you've got to do it concisely. Okay, no, this isn't working, we're going to change it. We thought this would be the way forward, but now we've got to abandon it. Those calls have to be made, and they have to be made sooner than later. So when you're doing those constant adjustments over 8 weeks for 6 different fighters, it mounts up.
Sounds like a full-time job, but of course the gym is so busy here, you're running that on top. So I know how many hours, and I actually went home to my wife and said, Eugene looks pretty buggered, and it was a week, before. So yeah, I can understand why you don't want to do it again. Can we just run through them fight by fight? And Kevin, first up, you must have been just overjoyed.
Yeah, I guess you always want to win your debut, right? So not everybody wins their debut, of course, but Kevin managed to get that one across the line. Had a bit of adversity in this in camp too, as typically happens. It's Murphy's law. Like if something's going to go wrong, it always goes wrong at the last kind of moment. And he had a really bad hamstring pull. So he tore his hamstring. It's still not better now, and so he wasn't able to. He was able to just basically box for the last week for fight week, and he wasn't able to kick. So So yeah, I mean, a little bit of adversity, but this is top level. This is top level. Like, that's gonna happen. Like, there's no alternative. You've got to get out there and you've got to do your job. So it's was a fantastic experience for him to have to go through a bit of adversity at the highest level and come through it unscathed. And he'll be way mentally stronger and a better fighter because of it. So he had an excellent fight. He dominated his opponent.
As soon as it didn't take him very long once he got to the ground. You expect him to be able to finish fighters like that. Is it his strength? What is it that he's just so skilled?
You see, yeah, it's interesting enough, I've got a crop of guys coming through now who their background it wasn't stand-up. They never come from a stand-up background like a lot of my guys did, especially early. They come from grappling backgrounds. And they've come here to learn some of the other intricacies to do with striking and to put a little bit more order around their grappling and kind of get rid of some of the flowers, like a lot of the stuff you don't need that's unnecessary. And like Kevin's advanced in that massively and got himself to a level where he's able to be very comfortable on his feet. Or he can, of course, grapple, which is a little bit more of his wheelhouse. But he's come into his own in terms of the stand-up part of the fight. Yeah, he's come into his own now.
Shane, it didn't work out well for Shane.
Yeah, Shane was obviously massively disappointing. Shane, whether he won or lost, I would have asked to take a time away from the sport, take a bit of a hiatus away from the sport. I'm not going to go into his issues that he has in his life, but he has some pretty big ones that he needs to deal with. And the UFC is such that you cannot... there's only X amount of time they'll give you off, and then you have to fulfill your obligations. And he was a man, and he stood up and did that, but he's got too much going on. And that's not making, there's no excuse for the fight and some of his previous performances, but, he jumped in there and he signed the dotted line, so he signed up for fight. But I just know he can do so much better if he works out some of the other issues that I won't go into in his life. You can't be an athlete at the highest level like he is and have your cup half full all the time. So don't know what Shane will do. My suggestion for him is to take a bit of a hiatus away from the sport and work on some of the other aspects of his personal life and himself. Some of the issues that he has within himself. And then come back to the sport when he feels in his soul that he's ready to be back in the sport, which is one of the toughest sports in the world, and you've got to be fully committed to. That was disappointing. I got nothing to say. The other disappointing thing for me is that Shane missed weight, and you can't ignore that fact. If you take that into context, to be honest, the right person won the fight. Shane didn't stick to the rules, and he paid an appropriate price for not sticking to the rules.
And that would be the first CKB fighter, UFC fighter that's never made weight.
Unfortunately, yes. We've had a few miss weight at the highest level, unfortunately. And there's absolutely no excuse for that. I can't sit here and be, I'm very vocal when someone misses weight and we're fighting them. I can't give Shane a pass just because he's our guy. I said he's just as guilty as our opponent. He's no different. We came down, like the team came down pretty hard on Shane. I came down pretty hard on Shane for that. And don't, respect the sport, respect this game, respect the sport, or otherwise it will come back around and bite you. That's all I gotta say. So, if anything, the rightful person probably won that fight. Anyway, and congratulations to his opponent. He did a fantastic job, and apologies to his opponent for missing weight, and he made Shane pay for missing that weight, like he should have. Yeah.
Blood did a good job as far as the grappling was concerned, and the wall work that he did in standing up.
Yeah, no, the Blood's had a great performance. The guy his opponent just did what he needed to do to win. The guy, he couldn't really do anything with Bloods, but he found a way to win, and he found a way to win just through controlling Bloods. At the end of the day, if you're being hard against the wall, even though you can't inflict any damage or can't take him down, you're still being held against your will. And in a fight where Bloods wasn't doing much back, just defending, and the guy wasn't doing much in terms of offense and damage, then you've got to go to the next thing down on the on the list, and that's control. And at the end of the day, there's just a little too much control time that Bloods couldn't mitigate. So well done to the guy. The guy did what he needed to do to win. So
Then on to Carlos. Carlos had some adversity too leading into the fight.
Yeah, Carlos was probably my standout performance that night. He at the start of the week could barely walk. We still don't know what it is, but I believe now we're kind of narrowing it down. Now he's actually had a broken bone in his foot, and it caused some internal swelling and an infection inside. We thought it was gout, so we were treating gout, and luckily the gout treatment kind of did something for it and slowly helped it to make some sort of an improvement. But we hit it as best we could. We couldn't really train fight week. I don't think he did. He might have done one training, and then he tried to train Thursday before the weigh-ins. I said, mate, there's no point, just show up to the weigh-in. You can't. And so, as you can imagine, that put some real mental pressure on Carlos, and he didn't waver once. He didn't once even look like he was going to come to me and ask me, or maybe I should not participate in this fight. I was like, it's too late for that. You're in fight week, and luckily he didn't even come close to doing that, because he went out there and fought a very good opponent who put a lot of pressure on Carlos, and Carlos had to soak that pressure up, and he did really well. It was a fantastic fight for his development going forward.
Carlos is usually outspoken as far as what he has in mind and what he believes he can do. With this opponent, he was not saying much, and I've just asked you now, it's all over. Was that a plan of yours that you wanted to get more rounds in?
No, not necessarily. It's just that the guy was a little bit unheralded, but when you watch his fights, you can see that, man, he might have had a few losses, and he's a little bit unheralded, not one harm, but you could see how dangerous he was. And he was dangerous because of his ability to be aggressive and his ability to absorb a little bit of shots. So, a guy like that who's aggressive and likes to come forward, you got to incentivize him not to do that. And one great thing about him as a fighter is disincentivizing him to come forward is very hard to do. because the guy doesn't get discouraged. The guy's got a big heart, and so the fight that kind of played out, we expected that the guy would come through a bit of punishment, and Carlos would have to slowly accumulate until he got him out of there. So I think Carlos was very reserved because he knew that this was a difficult fight, even though it was flying under the radar a bit. Carlos knew that this would be a really good test from an unheralded fighter. So I think Carlos was just on edge. We all were, yeah.
To get a submission, pretty happy at it. What was it like in the dressing room when he came back? Because he's a known striker for years.
Yeah. I mean, Carlos. That was just a technicality. Like it was the work that done before that led to the submission. The guy was took a lot of damage, but Carlos can wrestle. Carlos knows how to maintain the back, and he's got some pretty good sequences in his head to free the choking hand, and he's got a system. He's a guy that actually works. Carlos is in here almost immediately after every fight, working on his strengths, but also his weaknesses. He does a lot of wrestling, and one great thing about Carlos is, you get a lot of guys in fights, and they're like, man, I should have done this, I should have done that. Well, your ability to do that is severely hampered if you don't do it in sparring or training. If you don't shoot a double leg or a single leg or these sort of things in sparring when you're under pressure or when you're on the front foot, then you're never going to be able to just all of a sudden do it in a fight if you have to access it, that technique. But Carlos tries everything in sparring. He puts himself in bad positions, he shoots, he just gives it a go. And so by the time he gets to a fight and by the time he gets into a situation where he's going to need to use a particular technique that he's not well known for, he would have done many, many repetitions of that in both a drilling and a live scenario. So he's just one of those guys that really tests himself. Even after this fight, he wasn't able to do anything, but he's been watching all the trainings and he's been observing. He's just, if you want to be the best in the world, that's the work ethic you need. You can't train. Oh, you're still in here. You're still in here picking up stuff. And this is, if he's setting those foundations in this path now, this is how you get to the top.
Your light heavyweight team is pretty good because Tyson come out and he was back to his best.
Yeah. Like I said Tyson needed to bounce back from his last fight. He didn't perform in his last fight, and that it doesn't matter if you're, look at Carlos, who had a sore leg and could barely walk. Tyson had quite a bad illness the night before his last fight, but it doesn't matter. If you've got to have the ability to push through those things, and he didn't. He didn't have the ability to get over that this time, and he didn't perform very well in that fight. So he needed to come back and prove to everybody, but also prove to himself that his trajectory is still like that. He just had a bump in the road. So he just had a masterful performance. Yeah, again, like a little bit of an unheralded opponent, but one that if you gave this opponent an inch, he'd take a mile. He's pretty good. When you watch some of these young fighters that haven't had big tenures in the UFC, when you watch some of their fights outside the UFC, man, they're very skillful, very talented, and you can see they pose a lot of problems. And he had a good opponent in front of him that he managed to take out. So that was good.
Then of course on to the big one, and no one in New Zealand around the world expected it to go the way it did.
Yeah, including me. What can I say? You can't take anything away from the opponent. We prepared well for his style. and we just made too many mistakes. We couldn't, even though we actually changed tact a few times, it was one of those nights where nothing seemed to be working, or we couldn't communicate what we needed to do with Israel, and Israel couldn't execute it. When things didn't start to work, Israel, what we don't typically like to do is, everything's a progression that leads somewhere, but you can't just empty your basket straight away. You empty a part of it, but that leads to the next part of it, and the next part of it, and the next part of it. So if you show everything too early, because you start to get a little bit desperate because nothing's working, then you're not progressing through that basket in the right, how you should be. You're showing it all too early, and it became a little bit of a case of that. And then, I have no doubt that I thought he did really well with a knockdown and coming back from it, but I have no doubt that anybody who's actually had a fight knows that when you suffer a concussion and get knocked down like that, things happen. Yeah.
What did he seem like in the corner after the first?
Very good. Yeah, he was very lucid. He was there. I was actually really confident. Even during the fight, when he got knocked down and just the way he reacted, sometimes you just know your fighter so well, you know that they haven't done too badly out of it. They've recovered relatively quickly. But over the whole duration of the fight, you just don't know what that knockdown does. Has it slowed your reactions down? Has it slowed your mental processing down? The knockdown and the concussion, it can do a myriad of things. So I have no doubt that would have had some effect, and which is what it's meant to do. That's why you're trying to enact that if you can. If you can knock someone down and mess with their senses like that, that's what you want to do. But yeah, it was just without obviously I'm being very general because I don't want to give away too much because there's a potential rematch, but just a bad night in the office.
You said straight after the fight you wanted the rematch immediately, now that you've had time to think. When do you think your rematch is on?
I said that, and I still believe to this day we can turn that result around very fast. And this is not a normal athlete by any stretch. This is a unique athlete. And I'm not talking about his physical and mental capabilities. I'm talking about over 100 fights at the highest level. Over 100 fights. No one else has these sort of athletes. No one else. Because no one else has done the extensive work that we've done outside of the sport to gain this type of, outside of MMA, to gain this type of high-level experience, right? So this is an athlete who's seen everything, who's had every type of game plan we've imposed on him, and every sort of adjustment, every sort of look he's had in front of him. Sean brought something unique, and it was his awkwardness, and we thought we had dealt with that, and we have to do a better job at dealing with some of those the style that he defends in, and some of the other intricacies that he brings to the table, right? We didn't do a good enough job taking care of those things. But it's not like Israel's seen everything. Israel's seen everything. Not every athlete that gets to the UFC does. In fact, barely any do. None of them have 100 fights at the highest level. None of them. Some of them are lucky to have 15 or 20. One of the best guys in the world at coming forward and putting pressure on is a guy called Jason Wilness, who we fought and arguably did really well against, and some people think we beat. in terms of coming forward and being technically the best in the world at it, that's the guy who's the best in the world at it. Sean does that, but he does it in his own, he's got his own unique way of doing it. The point is that Israel's seen it all. He has this massive treasure trove or chest of experiences, techniques, adjustments, strategies, tactics that he can go into and pull out that other fighters don't have, because other fighters just don't have anywhere close to the amount of experience that he does. And that's what it was based on. It was based on, we can do this a week later and we can change this result, because we can go into that chest and we can pull out what we need to quickly make adjustments. Realistically, is a rematch going to happen a week later? No, it's not. It's going to happen when it happens. This is a million, and there's 101 things that have to be fall into place before a rematch happens.
When potentially are any of those fighters ready to fight again? Can you see them
Shit, I don't know, because there's a lot of injuries in that. Like Israel's got some injuries, Carlos has got some injuries, Kevin's got some injuries. I think Tyson came out clean, so Tyson possibly. I think Kevin's injury is already healing really well. Shane and Bloods, to be honest, I expect that was probably the last fight on their contract, and I couldn't tell you when they're going to fight. I think Tyson's indicated to me that he'll fight as soon as he can. So yeah, I'm not actually sure when. Yeah, I think for the most part, I think we're done for the year.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for the catch up, mate, because everybody's getting on to me. It's good to. This is a bit of a tradition, Tony. We got to wrap the fight night up, and thank you. Good to talk to you again.
Cheers, mate.